Glad you could join us today on EdFile. Welcome to the program. I'm Ayola Kasim. Around the world, cities are evolving at an unprecedented pace, grappling with profound challenges driven by urbanization, demographics, and climate change. City leaders face extraordinary pressures to manage this growth and implement sustainable development strategies. The Sustainable Development Goal 11 calls for inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable cities and signals the importance of cities in advancing sustainable development. Africa is the world's most rapidly urbanizing region. By 2050, more than 1 billion people will live in cities across the continent, while Nigeria is said to be Africa's urban growth giant, with almost 100 million people in over 780 of its cities, and this has produced so many challenges. Today, we look at how we can turn informal settlements into livable communities across Nigeria. Just stay with us. Meet Unisa from Matiri in Yobe. He's fleeing insecurity for a better life in Lagos. Asabe is from Gbogon in Osun State, but a better life in Lagos fascinates her, so she joins the bus to the city. So also is Emeka, an apprentice in Aba. They all join thousands of people who arrive in Lagos daily, contributing to the increase in Lagos population. Now put at 21 million. At independence in 1960, Lagos had an estimated population of just 763,000. This makes it one of 3 mega cities in Africa, alongside Cairo with 10 million and Kinshasa with 12 million. Today, Lagos is struggling to live up to its mega city status, and in recent times, it came up with a range of reforms, like restricting the movement of commercial motorcycle and clearing some slums. And behind these evident everyday challenges, we see a range of more long-term risks, like climate change and the impact of air pollution on health, uncertain economic development, and rising inequality. They all call into question the current pathways to greater prosperity and the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals.
I don't believe there's any government that probably wants to deliberately inflict pain on the citizens. I get to mean there could be one or two omissions somewhere in planning or communication with the people on the potential impact. When you are building anything, you want to build a road, there's going to be impact, negative impact on the people, and there are the mitigating factors that will have been built into the process. But we need to be able to communicate with the people so well, and I think maybe that's a missing link. But one thing I know is that I'm sure all the basic things, the basic factors must have been built into projects, and all we need to do is to communicate with the beneficiaries.
While Lagos is by far the largest city in Nigeria, security concerns, rural poverty, and hopes for greater economic opportunity are driving people to cities all over the country. In the decade between 2007 and 2017, Nigeria's urban dwellers increased from 41% of the population to about 50%. That is, 1 in 2 people in Nigeria lives in a city. In 2019, there were 7 cities with a population of 1 million or more, 80 with a population ranging between 100,000 and 1 million, and 248 with a population between 10,000 and 100,000. But much of this urbanization is unplanned and chaotic.
We have a huge housing shortage, and especially a shortage of affordable housing. So if you say this community or that community are an eyesore, you're not recognizing the fact that no matter what it looks like, it's someone's home. It's where someone's living. And they're living there because there isn't someplace else. So if you simply try to destroy that place, without providing any kind of alternative, without discussing with them how do we improve the conditions, all you're doing is undermining the human development and the capacity of those people to thrive and survive in the city. So what we need to do is stop looking at problems as problems, but understanding what are the causes of those problems. If it's an affordable housing shortage, if it's a shortage of viable economic opportunities in the formal sector, how do we work with the solutions that people are putting up themselves and turn them into something that fits within the vision of the city that we all share, which is a city that's resilient, sustainable, inclusive.
Currently, over 48 million people in Nigeria live in slums, and the number is rising. According to a World Bank report about African cities, cities on the continent feel crowded precisely because they are not dense with economic activity, infrastructure or housing and commercial structures. The group says the cities lack formal housing in reach of jobs and without transport systems to connect people living farther away, forcing residents to forego services and amenities to live in cramped quarters near their work. The realities of life in Nigeria's cities are hard. In Lagos, about 2 of every 3 people live in a slum. Less than 10% of residents have access to piped water, forcing urban householders to purchase water from vendors at up to 3 times the normal price charged by the state government. Only 6% of urban households have a flushing toilet that is connected to a sewage system.
The attraction of Lagos is the economic empowerment, the promise of economic empowerment that Lagos, gives to people. So, for instance, the Lagos state government has what you could call a sustainable development strategy. It calls it the FAMES. So it has 6 pillars. It hopes to focus on traffic management and transportation, hopes to focus on issues on health and environment, the entertainment and industry and what have you. And all of this is with the aim of making Lagos a smart city. So smart governance. So I think for a lot of the other states as well, there has to be a reshaping of governance. It's quite important to identify what the sustainable development strategy is for each of the states, and for the states to actually identify that these are my key priority areas. To make, to ensure that there are infrastructures and just to make the quality of life better for the people living in that state.
Many cities in Nigeria, like Lagos, struggle after decades of underinvestment. Swaths of green areas reserved in Abuja to beautify and give it an eco-friendly ambience have been left to wither, and in some cases have become dump sites and places for open defecation. From Benin to Port Harcourt, Kano to Ibadan, and all the major cities across the country, is the same story. Water taps run dry. Electricity, a luxury that does not exist, a mounting heap of refuse. But these cities also have the opportunity to learn from mistakes in creating centralized, large-scale public works.
Every high-income settlement, there's a slum growing up somewhere around the area, all right? Because the people that will service the high-income area, low density, they're low-income people. And now, except where you have cheap, affordable transportation, they want to hang around those areas. So they create a belt just around the high-income area. For every high-income area, there's a slum growing up somewhere around. So many cases abounds in Lagos I can give, and also Ogun State is already having such problems. You see high-income locations, and you start seeing people servicing those high-income areas, living in those uncontrolled areas. All right. So, for every serious city or city management, you have to manage both the high-income end and the slums. Slums have to be managed. Slums have to be properly organized, so that you don't transfer problems, inherited problems from the slum, and you don't bring it up there. So there is no way you eradicate slum. They will always be there. and they are never too far away from the high income end. So you plan it and you have to manage it.
But Nigeria is not the only country in the world that has a rapid urbanization problem. Informal settlements house almost 1 billion people around the world. The world is becoming increasingly urbanized. Since 2007, more than half of the world's population has been living in cities, and that share is projected to rise to 60% by 2030. Cities and metropolitan areas are powerhouses of economic growth, contributing about 60% of global GDP. However, they also account for about 70% of global carbon emissions and over 60% of resource use. Rapid urbanization is resulting in a growing number of slum dwellers, inadequate and overburdened infrastructure and services, worsening air pollution and unplanned urban sprawl. To respond to these challenges, 150 countries have developed national urban plans, with almost half of them in the implementation phase, ensuring that those plans are well executed will help cities grow in a more sustainable and inclusive manner.
And also one of the key important points is the issue of public participation, grassroots participation as well. It's quite important for governance. One of the issues that we tend to overlook in Nigeria is the importance of the local government. So whatever government does, there has to be a top-down approach and also a bottom-up approach.
Experts recognize that environmental deterioration is not inevitable. Although many cities are suffering severe environmental and economic damage, it is not an inescapable outcome of growth. Mounting evidence from cities around the world show that the fundamental challenge has to do with urban governance, better planning and effective management of urban development activities and the human environment.
We've seen research that's been done comparing India, China, and Nigeria on issues of urbanization, and the reality is that in Nigeria, natural population growth is a bigger contributor than migration as compared to those other countries. On our side, what we're doing is working together with communities to find the solutions that we can tackle at our level. But we know that communities and civil society can only do so much if we don't have the government supporting and working together with us. So even if the government is not ready to lead, the government could partner with us to try to find lasting solutions to the various issues. If it's an issue around, urban planning and informal settlements, we have very strong concrete examples of in situ upgrading that's a better alternative to forced eviction. If there's issues around security, let's work on community policing initiatives that can actually work. If it's issues around climate change, we have so many projects ongoing to try to mitigate and adapt to climate change impacts that are likely coming down the pike. What we need is stronger partnership from the government to make those things work well, to make sure that the policies aren't undermining community efforts and civil society efforts, and then to help take them to scale. Because once we've done something well in a few communities, we have a huge network. We're working in 144 informal settlements across Lagos, 60 in Port Harcourt. So we can take innovations to scale. We can start taking this to the level where it will have a citywide and societal impact. But that's where we need the government partnership, and we also need a government that's committed to helping positive development rather than undermining community and civil society effort.
Nigeria is projected to have almost 1 billion people by the year 2100. And with more UNISAs, Asabes and Emekas coming in, Lagos could become the world's largest metropolis, home to up to 85 or even 100 million people by that time. Experts say there is no easy solution and no quick fix. In the meantime, turning the makeshift and informal settlements into livable and sustainable communities across the country is the greatest challenge of our time. According to the report Climate Finance for Cities, the way in which cities develop over the coming decades will play a major role in determining the success of climate change mitigation efforts and the degree to which climate change impacts those at risk. Yet, most cities in the developing world face severe barriers to planning and financing the infrastructure investments necessary to steer their growth in a climate-compatible way. International public climate finance is a fraction of total financial flows, but has the potential to play a pivotal role in helping municipal governments and other urban actors overcome the many barriers they face. The financial community has taken important steps forward to tackle climate change and to accelerate the greening finance. Private capital flow are now being directed towards low-carbon projects, transition risk management, and green infrastructures. This, experts believe, incentivizes the financial sector to better account for environmental and social risk in the long term, and also brings a response to market demand.
Today we release the partnership between the C40 and IDFC, so the largest cities and their public financiers. And the idea is really to go from planning to building, so implementing urban plans, financing them, reinforce capacities, especially financial capacity within municipalities, and spur national governments together to set the proper policies.
As climate change creates huge ecological and economic damage, more and more money is being given to at-risk countries to help them prevent it and adapt to its effects. By 2020, this funding will reach over $100 billion annually. But according to Transparency International's findings, poorly governed climate finance can be diverted into private bank accounts and vanity projects, often leading to damaging effects. While climate finance has been a central element of the negotiations in one form or another since 1992, it is now most often associated with a target figure of mobilizing $100 billion a year by 2020 by developed countries for developing countries. This target was first agreed in the Copenhagen Accord in 2009 and expanded upon in the Cancun Agreement in 2010, while the Green Climate Fund was established to act as a key delivery mechanism. In the Paris Agreement in 2015, this target was further reinforced with a goal to raise the target after 2025, and that this funding would come from a wide variety of sources, public and private, bilateral and multilateral, including alternative sources of finance. The $100 billion target has now become a political focal point for further discussions around many aspects of climate change-related finance, particularly those related to developing countries. The debate is now focused on the detail of how to deliver this in line with meeting the Paris target and the Sustainable Development Goals, in particular how the $100 billion should be raised, if this target is enough, who should provide it, what financing mechanisms should be used, how it can be accessed, and where it should be distributed.
This theme and trend of sustainable investing / ESG, environmental, social, and governance, it is real, it is persistent, and it's happening across the investment industry. This is no longer a fad. This is no longer some sideshow. This is becoming full-on mainstream part of how we invest money.
A transition to low-carbon, climate-resilient cities will require both a substantial increase in the total quantity of urban infrastructure investment and a shift in the way that existing streams of finance are allocated. There is therefore a need for innovation, learning, and scaling of financing instruments, financial architecture, and governance structures. The United Nations says Latin America and the Caribbean is the second most urbanized region on the planet, with 8 out of 10 people living in cities. Between 1950 and 2014, the region urbanized at an unprecedented rate, raising its urban population as percentage of total from 50% to 80%, a figure that is expected to climb to 86% by 2050. Over the past 2 decades, the region's urban population and economic growth has been increasingly taking place in intermediate-sized cities, which are expanding exponentially. The Emerging and Sustainable Cities Initiative seeks to address these challenges by developing planning tools like greenhouse gas inventories and risk maps, as well as action plans to put cities in Latin America and the Caribbean on a sustainable pathway that includes low-carbon, climate-resilient development.
Rapid urbanization has really brought with it many challenges and some potential serious threats to the sustainable development and quality of lives of people, as well as natural capital in particular. A key challenge is sustainable infrastructure, and getting finance from the national, the federal level down to the city level is a particular challenge. And so it's really important that as we engage with the governments at the federal level, we bring the importance of working with cities around implementation of their climate objectives and their NDCs. So clearly, with 80% of the population in cities, it's clearly going to be critical that cities are enabled by their governments, to finance the implementation of climate actions that will contribute towards their NDCs.
According to the World Bank, the financing required for an orderly transition to a low-carbon, climate-resilient global economy can be counted in trillions, not billions. The bank says over the next 15 years, the world will require about $90 trillion in new infrastructure, most of it in developing and middle-income countries. Making the right choices in favor of infrastructure that is climate-resilient, that locks in a low-carbon development pathway, is critical and urgent, as action now will avoid huge costs later.
It's something called the Global Green Bond Partnership, which is with with EIB that you saw here, but Amundi, UNDP, Ceres, the Climate Bonds Initiative, the Global Covenant of Mayors, ICLEI, and a few others. And what this partnership will do is really going to try to help cities accelerate their ability to issue green bonds according to the green bond principles. And will really help with customized technical assistance and capacity building, de-risking, and helping them actually come to financial closure on specific transactions. And it also has something called a green bond readiness toolkit that helps cities look specifically at where they're constrained and where they're not competitive, and then what steps specifically, the barriers they need to overcome, what they need to take.
The World Bank Group, along with other multilateral development banks, continues to make a strong contribution to the global climate challenge. Collectively, the multilateral development banks increased their climate financing in developing countries and emerging economies to $35.2 billion in 2017, including more than $13 billion from the World Bank Group. The World Bank warns that by 2050, without concrete climate and development action, more than 143 million people in 3 regions, that is, in sub-Saharan Africa, Latin America, and South Asia, could be forced to move within their own countries to escape the slow onset impact of climate change, such as water stress and crop failure. Meanwhile, the new climate economy report titled Unlocking the Inclusive Growth Story of the 21st Century finds that transitioning to a low-carbon economy could result in $26 trillion in economic benefits worldwide through 2030. And also it could generate over 65 million new low-carbon jobs in 2030 and avoid over 700,000 premature deaths from air pollution in 2030. The world's population is constantly increasing. To accommodate everyone, we've been told to build modern, sustainable cities that involve ensuring security, improving infrastructure, and creating strong links between informal and formal cities. As experts say, for all of us to survive and prosper, we need new, intelligent urban planning that creates safe, affordable, and resilient cities with green and culturally inspiring living conditions. I'm Ayola Kasim, asking you to join us next week for another episode of EdFile. In the meantime, do check our page on YouTube. youtube.com/channelsweb is the address. Do click the playlist tab and then click EdFile. From all of us here in Lagos, it's bye for now.